Hey, girly, I want to share my testimony with you. And I have been very, very, very hesitant to share my testimony. I have not spoke on this on the internet, but God has been nudging me to share this for a very long time, but I have just, like I said, been very hesitant. So if you don't know me, hi, my name is Morgan. And for the first time on the internet, or probably the second time, I'm saying that I'm a survivor of DV. And I don't know how sensitive TikTok is, so I'm not gonna say the words, but I'm a survivor of DV. And here's my testimony. Um, the year before last, so 2023, I was in the living room, and this is like the short version. I'm gonna put the long version on YouTube, but this is because there's so much more that goes into this, so much backstory. But basically, I was with my ex-husband for 7 years, and we were married for 5. Um, when we got together, we were both, Christian, and I want to say like the relationship was always toxic. Like it was always toxic, but if you know anything about a battered woman, I always believed that he was going to get better and things would change. We did marriage counseling, we did couples counseling before we even got married. Um, and it never changed. Like for 2 years, I isolated myself from my family because my family didn't want to be around him. And here I am. I'm like, no, like if you don't want to be around my husband, then you're not going to be around me. Failing to see like everything that I was really, really, really going through in silence. Well, um, fast forward year before last, so 2023, I want to say it was like November. I remember being in the living room and getting on my hands and my knees and praying to God to make the situation better because it was that bad. And I remember saying, God, and here's a really other big part. At that time, I was practicing witchcraft. So I was into the tarot cards, I was into the crystals, I had the pendulum board, I was paying for readings, I was doing spells for other people, like the whole nine. And how I got into that, the enemy is very tricky, and that's a story for another video, which I'm probably gonna do because that's an important piece of this message. But anyway, I got on my hands and my knees. There was no one home, and I was miserable. Like I was literally miserable. I got on my hands and my knees, and I prayed to God, and I said, God, like if you just get me out of this situation, or if you just make my marriage better, because really that was my goal before. I said, if you make my marriage better, I promise you, I'll never touch another crystal. I'll never, read another tarot card. I just want to be happy. Like I want to be happy with my husband. I want to be out of this situation. I want us to be good. Okay. Well, fast forward to January. So January of last year, January 25th, actually, because I remember the date. Um, I had this like sudden urge to do a fast, and now I know that it was the Holy Spirit, but at that time I didn't know like it was the Holy Spirit. I thought it was just me like having this clever idea, but no, it was the Holy Spirit saying like this is what you need to do, and I heard the instructions so clear. So I went on a very strict fast, and it was supposed to last for 90 days, but it lasted 30 days at that time. And I'm still like into journaling really, really heavy. I have like 5 different journals, and I journal every night. So at that time, I wrote down the criteria for my fast. It was a 90-day fast. It was no alcohol, no dairy, no meat, no sugar. So only vegetables, fruit, and like nuts. So it was like real strict. It was real strict. No secular music. So during that time, I only wanted to listen to like praise and worship music, or like gospel music. And during that time, I also started going to church. My friend he would invite me to church, and I would never go. I would never go. And at that time, like prior to doing this fast, I was saying like I would never step foot in a church. Like I'm not going. But January rolls around, and I'm doing this fast, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to start, going to church. So I started going online during this fast. All right. So we're in January. Okay. So let's fast forward to February. So I started doing the fast, and I want to say about 2 or 3 weeks later, because I started the fast at the end of January. 2 or 3 weeks later, I had this dream, and mind you, this is another reason why I'm kind of annoyed with myself, because I've always been a dreamer, right? And we know that God speaks to us through signs, wonders, miracles, other people, prophets, dreams. He has several ways of communicating with us, right? He has always spoke to me through my dreams. So I don't know why I thought I needed to read tarot cards or pay somebody for a reading or use a pendulum board to talk to foreign spirits when God has been talking to me through my dreams since like all of my life, since I was my daughter's age. My daughter is 5 years old. Anyway, I had this very alarming dream basically. And the dream was basically that my ex-husband was like going to off me. And the dream felt so real that I knew it was prophetic. Like I knew, I'm like, okay, like I woke up and I was terrified because I could feel every part of that dream. And I remember waking up and texting my friend and saying, I got to get out. Like, I got to get out sooner, And at this point, because in November, when I did the prayer, I wanted God to bring us closer, right? But at this point, we're in like February, and it just like went downhill. We stopped communicating. We were very, very low on money. It was so bad that our car broke down in the middle of the road. He was struggling with some things that I won't say on the internet, but there was a lot of issues going on. I went down to the Apollo to to New York City to audition for the Apollo, and there was no communication whatsoever. I got in, by the way. So if you're free on March 19th and you're in New York City, come see me. There was no communication. So at that point, I knew that it was time to go, but that dream was kind of like confirmation for me. So I remember texting my friend and saying like, okay, I got to get out sooner. And like I said, I had been journaling that entire time. So in my journal, I had wrote that, it was time to go. Okay. Well, a day after I have that dream, I'm taking my daughter to school. And we go outside and she looks up, and my daughter at this time was only like 3 years old. Yeah, she's like 3. She looks up and she says, Mommy, look across. And I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, baby, that is a cross, And so I snapped a picture of it. I snapped a picture of that cross, and I was like, that's so cool. Like mind you, my daughter I didn't even know she knew what a cross was. Like I had no clue. But I snapped a picture of that cross, and I'm like, okay, like that's pretty cool, right? So I leave, I take my daughter to school, I come back home, and my ex-husband is like on the floor. He had like 13 firearms. He's on the floor in front of his firearm case, and he's playing like this music, which in his religion is like war music. So I'm scared. I'm scared. I walked in, and when I tell y'all, like I literally felt fear. I felt fear run through my body at that point. So I like the heaviness was so strong in that room. Like it was super heavy. So I look at him, and I look over at my journal. Then I look at him again, and something said, go grab your journal. So I go over to my desk. I grab my journal, and I quietly walked out, got in my car, and I drove somewhere, and I called my marriage counselor. Marriage counselor didn't answer the phone. So I called a close family friend. I'm like, okay, like husband, I'm not gonna say name. Husband's being weird. Like I'm actually scared right now because I don't know what's going through his mind. This is what's going on. I was scared to go home. And person calls him, and then person calls me back and says, okay, yeah, like he read your journal. He knows that you're gonna leave, and he also thinks that you replaced him. I'm like, okay. So at this point, I'm really scared. I'm like, okay, like what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Okay. So I stayed out. All day. I did not come home until like later that day. Stay tuned for part 2. Go to part 2.